Very nice to see you. How are you keeping?
I'm doing well. Good to see you, Sonia.
Great. So before we actually start this podcast episode, would you be able to tell the listeners and the audience who you are and what exactly you do?
I am what you call a classic muscle nerd. I have a associate's degree in neuromuscular and sports massage, but a bachelor's degree in aging sciences. More importantly, is that I've spent the last 20 years studying the human body from the muscle aspect, but more importantly, again, the tie between the mind and the muscle. And so, what I've been able to figure out here with some help of mentors is how we can stretch using the mind and how the mind can stop us from stretching the way we want to. So, once you get that mind muscle connection, stretching becomes very easy.
When you say stretch, I notice on your
Yes,
website there's something called stretch and release. Would you
that's
be able
correct.
to tell me a bit more about that? And is stretching obviously in the gym and things like that when people
hmm
are
hmm
obviously running and using equipment, um,
hmm
there's obviously layers to stretching and when is the best time to stretch and is different types of stretches will it be able to help
Sure.
people?
Sure, exactly. So stretch and release was something that I created. I had five mentors. I had two neurosurgeons, a kinesiologist, a chiropractor, and a PT as mentors. And they brought pieces of the puzzle to me. And the most important piece of the puzzle was understanding how emotional the muscle tissue and the fascia tissue. Now, the fascia tissue is what holds all your organs and everything together, but the muscle tissue and the fascia tissue are very emotional. So the brain plays a massive role with them, almost more than the physical side.
Mhm.
So I put this together with a specific type of stretching technique. Um, and I'll explain that to you in just a minute why that's important and how to self massage. But most important for the client is how much the brain plays a role. And
Mhm.
that once you understand your emotional state has more to do with the tension in your muscles than not. Now, when most people go to a gym, they go to a stretch class or they go to PE class at school and they talk about stretching, even in physical therapy, they'll talk about lengthening the muscles. Well, you're never lengthening any muscle in your body because it's attached on both ends. And that's a mistake that most people make in the muscle world. They think they're lengthening the muscles. What you're actually doing with stretching is you're releasing the tension in the muscle. So if you took a rubber band between your fingers and it's a certain length, and you twist that rubber band in front of your eyes, you'll see the rubber band shorten in front of your eyes. But if you untwist it, it goes back to the original length. That's the best way to think about your muscles. And so what we're doing is that in the stretch and release technique, is that everything you think, feel, and do will put tension in your muscles. Okay. That tension then will apply pressure to your joints, your discs, your nerves, your blood vessels, and change the way you feel based on state of mind. So if you're afraid or if you are scared or you're upset about something and you go into the fight or flight, all of your muscles go into a tense state to decide if you need to run or fight. Whereas if you're having coffee with a friend, all your muscles are relaxed and you could fall asleep. Okay.
Mhm.
So most of our body is more emotional than we think it is. I mean, if you're scared and you're running from the saber-toothed tiger, for instance, you're not going to get hungry. You're not going to want to stop and use the bathroom. You're not going to want to have sex with anybody. All you hope is that you run faster than your friend, okay? Because
Yeah.
one of you's going to die, okay? And that's the whole key to this is understanding that the mind, in whatever state of mind you're in, whatever you're feeling, has a powerful impact on the tension in your muscles. And so, what stretch and release does, it's a specific stretcher, like I said before, where you're only holding it for 5 seconds at a time to avoid a stretch reflex from the muscle, which comes from the brain. And because that stretch reflex then is that's the brain, when you get to that point that it starts to contract on you, the brain is saying, wait a minute, you could hurt yourself here. The brain's
Mhm.
not saying, no, pull a little bit harder, see if you can pull a little bit longer. That's not what's happening there. And so when you hold for long periods of time, you're actually doing strength training because your brain is contracting the muscle as you're trying to pull it the opposite way. So you've got resistance training, which is strength training. Then in the stretch side of it, you'll do the stretch 10 times after holding for 5 seconds. And all that 10 times is for is to let the brain see that that movement is totally safe. And before you know it, the brain will let go of the muscle and you'll move like you never moved before.
That's a really interesting perspective that you just offered. But there's one point that you made that kind of stood out, which was the state of the mind. So,
Yeah.
in situations where people have gone through, trauma, big T or little
Hmm.
t, I mean, I'm not a psychologist, so I don't know, but in those
Sure.
kind of situations, let's suppose that their body is still in flight and freeze mode and
Hmm.
it's like a constant cycle of self-sabotage. So
Hmm.
in those conditions, what's the best way that somebody can actually get to the root cause of that
Hmm.
pain? Because I don't know if you're aware, but like I think that the sometimes the pain is showing physically, but there's always like an under
Yeah.
layer of
Hmm.
some sort of like emotional or psychological pain.
Hmm.
Would you be able to tell me a bit more about that?
Absolutely, absolutely. I can tell you more and give you a couple of examples as well.
Perfect.
When you're dealing with a trauma, whether it's a big T or a little T, and that includes a surgery. I mean, a surgery is a trauma, even though that many times the doctors do amazing jobs with that. It's still a trauma. When you're dealing with any type of a trauma, the brain is replaying that trauma in your mind. And when the brain then can't tell the difference between reality and what you've got going on in your mind.
Hmm.
So it's just like having a dream. You have a dream at night and it seems real as you're having the dream and your body's reacting to that dream, even though you're laying in your bed. You're not running across the bridge that's about to collapse on you or anything like that. You're still laying in that bed, but your body's reacting to it. Well, the same thing happens with trauma. Every time you relive that trauma, the body then goes through the same machinations that it did when it actually happened.
Mm.
So, a couple of examples. I had a gentleman who'd had neck surgery, and I started working on his neck and his shoulder muscles, and all of a sudden he was able to start turning his head, probably about 60 degrees of what a normal range would be. But for him, that was a massive gain. The guy literally choked up, almost came to tears. And
Oh,
what it was that from the surgery, they put some rods and stuff in his neck. And from the surgery, he was afraid that if he turned his head, he could damage himself. And the fact that he realized the freedom of being able to do that allowed him to let that go. And when he did, usually tears show up. I've had people who would lost a spouse or they lost a child, and they would come in and they'd have low back pain, for instance, or they would have upper back, mid back pain, and you'd start to free those muscles up. And I've seen so many people lay on the massage table and curl up like a baby and just start crying because they
wow.
were releasing that trauma from the body, you see. And again, when you deal with trauma, you look at PTSD, every time they relive that trauma, the body reacts the same way as the day they went through it.
Oh, wow. So the trauma actually stays in the body
Yes.
until it's released. So is
Yeah,
that potentially why a lot of coaches have lots of different up regulating and down regulating breathing
that's
um,
correct.
techniques to get the trauma out? So
Yep.
even
Yep.
even when you're um, doing your day-to-day life and you're busy and you're getting older,
Hmm.
if you've not actually released that pain, it stays within you.
Absolutely. Even back when you were 3, 4 years old, you fell off your bike.
Yeah.
That's still with you unless you've released that.
Oh, wow. And
Yeah.
on a separate note, then what about in conditions where like there's inflammation and pain?
Hmm.
Is there like any relation on how it affects the muscles and things like that?
Sure. So inflammation can come from several different factors. Obviously, the injury can cause inflammation, which is one type of inflammation. The foods that we eat can cause another type of inflammation. Inflammation is systemic. In other words, it's throughout the body. We normally think of inflammation in the joints and in the disc of the spine, but the inflammation is also in the brain, so it can affect you cognitively as well as it can physically. Okay. The muscles then, when you start to have that inflammation, as you start to feel the pain, as you try to say move your knee or move an elbow or whatever, as you start to feel that pain, the brain then anticipates the pain and will start contracting the muscles early in anticipation that it's going to hurt. And then as that happens and that muscle continues to get tighter and tighter, now the range of motion of the knee or the range of motion of the elbow or the shoulder, whatever the case may be, becomes less and less and less over time. And over time, you can start to damage those joints. So the reality is if you can be on a lower inflammatory diet, if you can do things that reduce the inflammation in your body, and you get into things like stretching and massage and movement, just movement, period, what happens there is that you keep the spacing in the joints, you keep the spacing in the disc, which allows the body to naturally lubricate those areas. And also from the brain, you improve your cognitive abilities as well when you do that.
That's really, really captivating to hear
Yeah.
because you mentioned like cognitive abilities.
Hmm.
What if in certain situations, like for example, in the case of someone who's been raped, what if the mind has closed that off? How would
Hmm.
that trauma be released through stretching and releasing and
Okay.
muscle work? Is that a
Yeah.
way? Yeah.
Yeah, something when you talk about trauma like a rape or someone has attacked you, the mind will block it off to try to block the pain, but subconsciously, the mind is still holding on to what's happening there. So you have to pretty much unlock those things in that person's mind to get them to finally release that and let it go. You consciously can block it off, but subconsciously, it's going to still be in there until you do that.
Yeah. And what's kind of like the process of how can someone actually use this technique to heal themselves? Like,
So,
especially if they're
yeah,
not aware that,
yeah,
because obviously when life happens, people get older, lots of different things happen, and they're in different environments as well.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
how would someone activate that self-awareness to then think, okay, I can actually look into maybe healing parts of my body?
Hmm. So you touched on something that a lot of people talk about is that the getting older, the aging side of it. And it's like people equate getting older with having to feel more stiff or having to feel more pain.
Hmm.
Uh, Really and truly, what happens there for so many people is they've been carrying this load of mental anguish or trauma, whatever you want to call it, and they've been tightening their bodies for 40, 50, 60 years. 70 years. And it's like as they continue to do that, their body gets stiffer and stiffer and stiffer. So, in using something like the stretch and release, a couple of things that you're doing there by understanding how the mind works with the tissue of the muscles and the fascia, you are actually letting go from the mind to release the tension in that fascia and that muscle tissue. And as you do that, now the body starts to unlock. You take the pressure off your joints, you take the pressure off your disc. But the first step of that is you've got to be aware in your mind that and be aware of your mind that you've got to allow the mind to relax. You so many times I see people, they're trying to do things and they're thinking of what they did an hour ago and how
Yeah.
terrible was that and what was going on with there, or they get on the phone and they're talking to somebody, I can't believe so and so did that to me yesterday, and they're reliving that again. All the while they're trying to stretch. Or they're thinking about, oh my gosh, tomorrow I got to do so and so. That's never going to work out right. While they're trying to stretch. And what they don't understand is that going through those conversations, either in your head or with somebody else, you're tensing the muscles as you're trying to stretch the muscles and take the tension out of the muscles, you see.
Hmm.
And so what the first step is learning how to just sit quietly and get more control of your mind. And I just talked to a lady a couple of days ago, and we were talking about it, and she said, how do you do that? And I said, well, it's sort of like a TV screen in your head. You're going to have thoughts running through your head. No one, unless you're a trained monk, is going to sit with absolutely no thoughts. Okay. But if you let those thoughts run through your head without judgment, it'll like run through one ear and out the other. And
Yeah.
so the thing is the judgment as to where people get in trouble with their thoughts. Yeah, I should have
Yeah.
done this. I wish I'd have done that. Why did they do this? Why did they do that? If you take the judgment away from it, those thoughts will start to subside. As you do that, then you'll start to realize your body will become more pliable because you're not fighting that fight, even though it's in your head.
Yeah. That's, yeah. So then, if that's the way that the body and the mind connects
Mhm.
negatively, what would happen in the positive part when
Oh,
you're actually
yeah.
talking to yourself, and you're things
Yeah.
like, saying affirmations and things like that? Does that have any scientific improvement in improving your mood, in improving your cognitive abilities and things like that?
No, no. I mean, the affirmation, I see people all the time with affirmations, I'm going to be rich. I'm a rich person. I'm a rich person. I'm going to find love today. I'm finding love today. I'm finding love today. The key to that is you got to believe that into your soul.
Mm,
You can repeat something a billion times, but if in your head's like, yeah, right, you're going to meet somebody great. All right, good luck with that. That's never going to happen. And then it creates tension, and then the tension in your mind creates tension in the body. And
yeah.
so when you're on the positive side, when the best way I heard it described was in an article in the Harvard Medical Review, and they were saying the best way in a growth mindset is that instead of looking at I'm going to fix this problem right here,
Hmm.
you want to explore as to why does my knee hurt? Why does my back hurt? And years ago, one of my mentors was a neurosurgeon, and she said to me, a lot of times when someone's looking at your spine because you have pain in your spine, they're taking a scan or what they call a snapshot of that particular area of your spine. And they may see a disc that's bulging. Well, they've been trained to fix that. They know how to fix that. What the
Yeah.
question most of them never ask is, how did that disc bulge to begin with? Because
Mm,
if you don't understand that, what's going to stop another disc from bulging once you fix the one that's bulged already, you see? So on the positive side, if you're looking at exploring, why does my back hurt? Why does my knee hurt? The back is a simple one. Most times people will have low back stiffness and low back pain. They think they have a back problem. In fact, some people will say, that poor Jackie, she always has a bad back. That poor girl, she can never get her back straightened out. That maybe they could do something with an injection or a surgery, okay? Well, what they don't understand is that you have a natural curve in your lower back. And the positioning of the pelvis can either flatten that curve out if it's the hamstrings that are tight below, or increase that curve, pinching the disc if the quads on the front of the thighs become tight and pull the pelvis forward. So the real cause of the back pain is not the back. The real cause of the back pain is the positioning of the pelvis based on how tight muscles in the thighs are. And you can,
hmm.
and what, so once you start to explore why does my back hurt, for instance, versus I just need to put a patch on my back so I can fix this pain for now. I just need to take a pain pill. If that's all you're going to do, you're in what's called a fixed mindset, and you're going to fight that for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
But if you take that on and say, I'm going to figure out what's causing my back to hurt, not just my back hurts. Now all of a sudden you'll get different answers.
So in the case of our entire body, like
Hmm.
if someone's hand is hurting and
Hmm.
someone's, I don't know, they always have constant migraine and things like that, is that in relation to the spine and the spinal cord? Like, what's the most important organ in the body that needs to
All of
be
all of them,
all of
all
them?
of them. I mean, take any of them out, we're not going to be here.
Yeah.
If I mean, you could label it to the brain, the heart, the lungs, the stomach. If someone lost any or all of those, you'd no longer be here. So they're all pretty important. They all work together, and that's what they
Mhm.
understand. Understand your body as a simple piece. Okay.
Yeah.
So again, you go into the fight or flight, and all of a sudden the brain says, all right, we've got to run or we've got to fight here. We need to turn some things off. So we're going to turn the digestive system off. We're going to turn the reproductive system off. We're going to turn um, uh, any number of things that you normally would do. That if you're being chased by somebody, if a guy's chasing you with a gun, for instance, you're not going to stop at Starbucks to get a cup of coffee. That's not going to happen. Okay. You're just going to run for your life. Right.
Yeah.
So the body is intelligent enough that it knows how to shut things off to get you there. Okay. And then it engages the muscles in your body to help get you out of trouble. So you want to look at the body as a whole piece.
Yeah.
When we spent years now educating people, you got knee specialists and hip specialists and ankle specialists and shoulder specialists, and all that's wonderful because those guys are able to dive really deep into those specific areas. And we've learned so much from research that, my gosh, now they can replace a knee in like 30 minutes or less. Okay.
Oh,
You,
wow.
you they don't even let you stay overnight in a hospital. I have a sister-in-law who's going to have her knee replaced on Thursday as an outpatient. It used
Hmm.
to be people stayed in the hospital for a week, so now it's as an outpatient. So we've gone really well over there. The problem that we have as a patient and as a practitioner is we're not understanding that if the knee is off, it's going to make the hip off. It's going to make the ankle off. It's going to affect the shoulders up on top. So, I mean, if your calves are stiff, for instance, and your ankle can't bend very well, you're more likely to have head forward posture. Now, the calves are a long ways from your head. But
Hmm.
because the ankle can't bend properly, you'll lead with your nose, which will eventually lead to head forward posture. So the best answer to your question is the whole body as a whole piece.
Hmm.
Everything gels together. And that's why it's important to know these things.
So then, if it's the whole body, what
Hmm.
about in situations? Because you mentioned about we the body adapts. So what
Hmm.
about in situations where people are still physically in that toxic environment because they can't get
Hmm.
out of it and stuff like that? What advice would you give to them? But on top of the advice, what would actually improve their life? Like, what
Right.
could they do? Because there are people who are like in who are homeless or they're in
Hmm.
like a very difficult situation in their life and
Hmm.
for whatever reason they can't come out of it. how can they how can they take small but important steps to
Hmm.
improve just the overall quality of their life at that
Hmm.
moment?
All right. Good question. I mean, it's not a one size fit all. I mean, everybody's situation is a little bit different. The main reason when you see people, and even when I mean I've been in situations similar as well, where I had to start realizing my self worth,
Hmm.
and when I started coming back to my self worth, then all of a sudden I started changing how I looked at things a little bit differently. Now that's not an easy task. I make it sound easy, but that's not an easy task. I remember one time I was in my 30s and I was literally living in my Jeep at the time for like about 2, 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And at first I was like really mad. I was not happy at all about that. And then one morning I'm sitting there and I had a nighttime job and I was thinking to myself, wait a minute, this isn't so bad. Number one, I have a nighttime job where I have a shower and I can launder my clothes. And then I go to the gym as a trainer in the daytime to make additional money. And there I can shower and have a pool and I can work out. So I don't have to worry about the cops messing with me in the middle of the night trying to sleep in the park. And I just started working that way backwards. And I was like, well, there's a way out of this, you see.
Hmm.
Now everybody's situation is different.
Yeah.
Some people are in some really bad situations, and I get that. And the one thing that you want to try to do, my best advice to them is find people and organizations that can help you. I mean, if you're in a domestic violence situation, or you're in a homeless situation, or you're a mental health situation, try to get with organizations and people who can help you find your way back. And the key to it is once you start to bring back your self-esteem, your self-worth, and you realize you're worth something, because everybody on the planet is worth something. We have a gift to give to everybody. Uh, Now you can start to bring your life back. It's not an easy task, and that's why not everybody can do it. But my best advice is find an organization or find people who can help you in the situation you're in to help bring you back out of that.
That sounds very promising.
Yeah. I mean,
Even-
too many times, people get in situations and it's like, I don't need anybody. I can figure it out myself. Well, my thought is we haven't done too well up to this point. So why do you think you can dig your way out?
yeah.
And it's my situation wasn't terrible. But for some people, their situations are far worse than where I was. And that's what I would say is go to organizations who can help you and people who can help you with your situation.
Why do you feel that people can't ask for help easily? Like it's easy for some people to ask and it's not easy for others to ask.
I think it's upbringing. I think that, in our society, um, we pride ourselves on, he's a self-made man, she's a self-made woman, which none of that's really true. I mean, when you start listening to people who are highly successful, that everybody claims they're self-made, there were people along the way who, gave them a break here, gave them a break there, or they had a shot based on somebody putting them in front of something. Now, they had to do their own thing, but they got somebody to put them in front of somebody else who could really help them. I think it's a misguided thing for people to teach us to do that on our own. I just, I just say that nobody does it alone.
Nobody does it alone. So
No.
even like in extreme examples like, you know, those who are addicted to alcohol and drugs and things, they
Right.
all need some kind of support system
Hmm.
in place to get them out of their condition.
Absolutely.
How does alcohol and certain types of drugs affect or is there an effect or an influence on muscles?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's definitely an effect. I mean, as you change the body by being intoxicated by drugs or alcohol, very similar to inflammation, when you change the state of mind, you change the tension in the body itself. For some drugs, they can make you paranoid, which is going to make you very tense. Some drugs will make you very relaxed and loose, which would have the opposite effect. So anytime that you put stimulants in your body that will affect your state of mind, it will change your whole body.
And just the final point.
Hmm.
What about in sort of extreme mental health conditions, like those who are schizophrenic or
Hmm.
bipolar, or they have narcissistic personality disorder?
Hmm.
So there's a sort of like a grandiose element to them that they're not
Hmm.
really necessarily aware of. What
Hmm.
advice would you give to those or to listeners who perhaps know people with that type
Yeah.
of condition?
Yeah, I mean, there you're dealing with something that's a little beyond, somebody taking drugs or alcohol, or somebody who's dealing with just anxiety. When you look at that, you obviously want to be able to get help not only from medications but also for therapy. And there's several organizations and several professionals that are successful at helping people in all of those situations. The first step is like with anything, the first step is for the person to realize that they're dealing with an issue to begin with.
Hmm.
Until that person realizes that, nothing's really going to change. That's where it has to start. I mean, we all have loved ones who have mental health issues or have personality disorders and so forth. They have to understand that they have this issue, and they're the only ones that can get help. I mean, even if you're talking about someone who's an alcoholic or a drug addict, until they realize they have a problem, you're never going to get them to any place for help because they don't think there's anything wrong.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
in terms of the extreme side,
Hmm.
what about just if you take a normal person,
Hmm.
um, how does different emotions show up in the body or how is it suppressed? Like, for example, if someone feels or has a lot of anger in them or a
Yeah.
lot of sadness in them, a lot of confusion in them or whatever it is, does each emotion show up differently and does it influence the muscle differently?
Yeah. So think of it this way. So picture in your mind a person is sad, not quite depressed, but very sad and having a terrible day.
Hmm.
When you picture that person standing in front of you in your mind, what does that person look like?
They're
Short.
probably like very closed off from the world and their head is a bit down and they're not
Yeah.
very open. Their body language seems to be quite
Right.
reserved, I guess.
Right. So then picture a person standing in front of you. They're so mad they could just hit you right in the nose. What does that person look like?
Definitely aggressive. And most likely their muscles are really tensed.
Yeah. Now, picture someone who just got married or they just won the lottery. What does that person look like?
Happiness and joy over the moon.
But you see how their body changed in just the state of mind.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we're talking about. So, whether it's melancholy, whether it's envy, whether it's whatever the emotion you want to put in there, every emotion affects the body in a different way, just like that. And so when you see somebody who's in a different emotional state, right off the bat, what you pick up on is their body language.
Yeah.
And so in our lives, when we look at our muscles and we look at our body, understanding that if we stay in a state of mind where we're always anxious, we got 1,400 things to do. We got 28 hours worth of work to do in 24 hours. And oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to do that and blah, 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 blah. When you think about a person like that, you picture that person, they're very tense, they're very uptight.
Yeah.
Can't be good for the body. Can't be good because you're putting the body under total chronic stress 24 hours a day. So in other words, the famous saber-tooth tiger is chasing them 24 hours a day, whether they're in bed or they're sitting at their office, doesn't matter. So the state of mind then plays a massive role in your future health outcomes.
Yep. You mentioned future, which is something I'd wanted to talk
Mm-hmm,
about now. Um, do you feel that because of how modern society is now, in terms of the way we work, is so
mm-hmm,
different to the way that
mm-hmm.
our ancestors used to work? And
Yes.
I feel like even the way that men and women work is very different. I feel like because there's been a real shift in how women go to work and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. Even though we're living today, is our muscles still operating from 400 years before in the sense of like the evolution side of it?
Same way, same way. And what I tell you is my opinions. When you look at from our ancestors, they went to work with their hands most of the time.
Yeah.
Men and women, women were taking care of the homes and they were helping with the gathering of foods and cooking and doing things with children. And men were going out as the hunter gatherers and they were killing the deer or whatever and bringing them back and having to struggle with that. Our ancestors didn't have the chronic stress on a daily basis we have today.
Very
They didn't
true.
they didn't have the perceived fears that we have today. They didn't have 24-hour news that were telling them that everything was going to be an apocalypse no matter what it was because coffee at Starbucks just went up another dollar. Life's never going to be the same and the sky's going to fall any moment. So you've got people who are living today under chronic stress of things that haven't even happened but could happen.
Hmm.
uh, we've got so many stimuli that from social media to TV, we're trying to do 28 hours worth of stuff in 24 hours. We're looking at ads that says that the clothes that we have, even though we just bought them yesterday, are already out of date. So we need to buy more clothes, which creates more pressure. And oh my gosh, I can't believe she wore those shoes with that outfit. Who does she think she is? And so we've got all this stuff going on in our lives. The bigger picture is if you go back to when we went from the farming age to the industrial age, was a massive shift because people had lived on farms their whole lives and all of a sudden they were moving into town to work in factories.
Yeah.
Now we're going from the industrial age into the digital or technology age, whichever you want to call it, where we no longer have to go to the factory to work. We can do things right from our desk at home if we want to, in most cases. And so how we do things changed drastically, but from a human aspect, that change is massive in how we think because now we rethink everything we're doing, which causes stress.
Hmm.
And so we're eating on the run, especially in the States, we're eating on the run. We're in
Yeah.
our car driving from place to place and we're grabbing fast foods because we can get it through a drive-through. And when our ancestors used to sit and have a 2-hour lunch and laugh and talk with their friends as they were eating their food, now we're in a car running 90 miles an hour down the interstate to get to our next meeting as we're shoving a hamburger and fries into our face and we wind up becoming obese and we wind up becoming metabolically unhealthy and our brains they're inflamed and they're not working really well and so we've created almost a disaster uh, mainly because of as humans we haven't really evolved to a point where we understand how to pick and choose what we want and can do in our lives.
Hmm.
And I think that for so many people, they feel like they're under the gun every single day
Yeah.
because we were taught by mom and dad, it's not nice to say no. It's not nice to say
Mm.
no. And really learning how to say no to some things and saying, you know what? That's nice, but I don't know that I really need that car. I don't really know that I need to live in that neighborhood, or I don't know if I
Yeah.
really need to buy that shirt. My wife always laughs because, like, for me, if I go and I buy, say, one or two shirts, when I go home, I take one or two shirts out of my closet and donate it to somebody that could use it. And she always thinks that's funny, but in my mind, it's like I'm not wearing those two shirts. Why would I leave them hanging in my closet? What if somebody else could use those two shirts?
Mm.
It beats letting it hang in the closet, so I just swap it out, you see. But it's about mindset. It's all about mindset. How we live our lives, how happy we are is based on mindset. So even though I'm with the stretch and release technique and I work with the muscles mainly of the body, the one thing I've learned through all of this is how happy we are depends on the mindset. How healthy we are depends on the mindset. How wealthy we get depends on the mindset. So I used to always say to my daughters who are now grown women, you are where you are by choices that you make. If you don't like where you are, change your choices, and where you are will change, good or bad. Doesn't matter. But you have to make different choices if you don't like where you are. And I think that for so many people, we are trying to live the way we did 40, 50 years ago in a world that's very different than it was back then.
You mentioned choices. Do you feel like people today have a lot more choices, but there's
Yeah.
also a sense of paradox because of how many options and choices we have?
Yeah, I met a guy many years ago, early 2000s from General Motors. In fact, I at the time I was in school and learning stuff, and I was working part-time at a General Motors dealership. And he said to me, this was 2002, 2003, that when a person chooses like a GMC truck or a Chevy truck, there are 250,000 different choices that goes into that truck to make it what it is.
Oh, wow. And that's
Yeah,
too
yeah,
much. So
yeah,
imagine like businesses and just even
yeah, yeah.
pavements
So
and things like that.
yeah. So you think about all the choices you make in everything you buy. So you go to a place and you have shirts, for instance. There's probably 20, 25 different colors of shirts, and which color do you want? And do you want a long sleeve? You want short sleeve? You want three-quarter
Yeah.
length sleeve? Do you want the scallop bottoms or do you want the rounded bottoms on it? Do you want it to be made out of cotton or do you want it to be made out of this material? So what buttons do you want to go on it? So all those things create pressure for people because they're trying to figure out what is the best one for me. And the
Yeah.
reality is it doesn't really matter.
Do you feel that, what do you feel the future will look like in terms of just with, I mean, stretching and releasing, of course, will there
Mhm.
be any integration of like sort of like the medical advancement,
Yeah.
artificial intelligence? What do you think will happen in the future? How would medicine evolve?
Yeah, I'm excited about the future. I think AI, especially in healthcare, you think about a doctor being able to put in your symptoms, and AI will be able to comb through 30,000, 50,000, 100,000 different cases, and within seconds, and be able to come back with a better probably diagnosis than a human being can do it. Because for a doctor to go through, say, 10,000 cases before he makes the diagnosis about you, it's going to take a while.
Yeah.
And so when you look at AI and you look at the things that are happening there, we're going to be able to put things together that, we've been doing a lot of research. We learned about the different specific parts of the body, but we're going to be able to put things together and actually spit them out in seconds to people that could
Wow.
probably save their lives and definitely improve their lives. I think we're going to learn new ways of how to deal with mental health instead of just writing prescriptions and filling people with medications. I think that in my mind, I see us getting to a point where we really start getting into helping people with that. I think from the personal standpoint for AI is going to take a lot of pressure off of people. That things that they're trying to do today by hand, AI is going to have a big help in solving those problems for them. And I think education will have to change. We've been educating people to work in factories for 50, 60 years. And
Yeah.
I think that we have to change the way we educate people today and get them ready for this new frontier that we're running into. So, can there be problems? Absolutely, there'll be problems. There'll be
Yeah.
glitches that we'll have to fix. There'll be things, and nothing's going to work perfect. But I do think that in the future, we may see an actual happier future for us as humans than what we see today.
Yeah. But what about in terms of like human connection as well? Because I think since,
Yeah.
especially the younger generation, I've got cousins who just use the iPad and they
Right.
don't know how
Right.
to have and hold a conversation with someone. And there's
Yeah.
actually a lot of individuals in my sort of generation
Hmm.
and my year group who don't know
Yeah.
how to conversate and things like
Yeah.
that with lots
Yeah.
of people from different ages and things like
Right.
that. How do you feel? Would AI be a disadvantage or an advantage or both?
Well, it could go both ways. It's like, even in my generation, people are more into texting and more into let's just do a Zoom call or let's do this versus getting in my car and driving to see them. Uh, I think that two things will happen. I think in education, when I was in University of South Florida back in 2017, 2018, many of the professors said to the students, because they'd asked me to give talks on public speaking and why is that important, that the people who are able to communicate to the masses and to other people are going to be far more successful than just people with high grades in academia.
Yeah.
Um, Most of the problem that people had when I was in school in 2017, 2018 was when they got in front of people, they would panic and in some cases nearly pass out. And
Oh,
they're
wow.
standing in front of 25 people, okay? And so what was funny was me being the older guy in the class because I was like 56, 57 years old, and I'd been to Toastmasters and speaking in front of people was an easy thing. They'd always, all the students would recruit me on their presentation teams. And so some of the professors got wind of it and they would put me off to the side and they would assign me to a team at that point. But the point is that for people to learn how to communicate, communication is going to be huge. Whether
Yeah.
you're on a screen like we are now or you're in person one to one, communication is huge. How to read body languages of people. When I give talks and I give speeches, I enjoy the interaction with the people in the crowd because I can now tailor my talk on the fly based on the feedback I get from the audience. What do they really want to hear?
Yeah.
Uh, not memorize a speech. A lot of times when I was in school, you see they would read the slides on the screen because they were so nervous they couldn't remember anything. And it's
Hmm.
like being able to tailor things on the fly so you can have that conversation with somebody becomes real important. And so I think from AI's perspective, it can make life easier, but at the same time, it can also allow people to hide behind the screen.
Yeah, absolutely. On point.
Yeah, and the thing is that as young people who are wanting to get out in the world and they want to do some great things in their life, communication, man, you got to learn how to communicate. I mean, I would invite people to go to places like Toastmasters. It's very inexpensive, very
Yeah.
easy to do. But anywhere communication courses in college and so forth, participate in those, get to the point that you can read body languages and you can start to to communicate with people, not just verbally, but through your
Mm.
body language and theirs. Yeah, yeah.
Non-verbal communication.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, even in the dating world, we've even lost that communication in the dating world because we're swiping left or swiping right. And,
Yeah.
it's like, really, all these young guys sometimes will say to me, so any advice on how to meet girls? I'm like, yeah, go meet girls. Don't sit on the screen. Go meet the girls. It's like they want to see you in person. And it's like I think it's funny because I always said when I was single, of course I'm happily married now, but when I was single, I just did what I liked doing, and the girls just showed up. I mean, they were
Yeah.
in the same space, and it's like you just talk to them like people. That's
Yeah.
all. You don't have to have an agenda. Just talk to them like people, and surprisingly, girls like that.
But I think I'm not sure if you've watched Adolescence on Netflix. I'm not sure if
I
it
haven't.
airs.
I
I
haven't.
don't know if
No.
it airs in the US, but there's this Buzz show called Adolescence in the UK, and there's a real shift in how young men are approaching women and things like that.
Yeah.
And I think because, like you rightly pointed out, it's the phones, it's the
Hmm.
fact that it's the phones, it's the iPads, it's the interaction, it's all of that. And I
Hmm.
feel like we're losing that very important survival skill of learning
Yes.
how to connect to each other. I
Yes.
mean, connecting this way is amazing because you're on the other
Right.
side of the world. It's a different time, and I'm in the
Exactly.
UK, and it's like nearly bedtime. But
Right.
still,
Right.
Yeah, and we can still
Yeah.
connect. But I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of young boys don't know
Yes.
how to connect. But
I
anyway,
I I think young men are intimidated by women today. I think
yeah,
women are really gaining a lot of speed and getting ahead of young men in
yeah,
school.
yeah,
I think that as they are empowering themselves with better jobs, they're making more money. They no longer need them for financial resources.
hmm,
They don't really need them anymore for protection either.
yeah,
And so biologically for the male, I mean, your worth is your provision and your protection of women.
yeah,
Now, when women become pregnant, of course, they obviously need a little more attention and protection at that point. But I think the key to it for young men is experiencing life with women as they are. Um, I think to me, a woman who is educated, a woman who has drive, a woman who, um, you can have a great conversation with her, is a powerful thing.
yeah,
And as a man, those are the kind of women that we really want to see, versus a woman who needs to be taken care of almost like a child. We don't, I mean, that's great. That's great when you're 20 and you're young and it sounds great, but it's like as you get older and get to be my age, you want somebody you can have a conversation with,
yeah.
and you want someone who's intelligent. And I learned over my life that intelligent, driven women are pretty cool.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. Talking about me.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yes. I mean, but we're in a different time, and men and women are in a different time. Women are naturally nurturers and men are naturally into protecting and provision. You can still have that biology with the world today. You just as a guy, you want to talk to women as humans,
Yeah,
and you
absolutely.
understand they bring something to the table by who they are. We bring something to the table by who we are. And a marriage is a team thing. It's like a business partnership.
Yeah.
If we're not on the same page in a business partnership, that's not going to work either. And you have to be on the same page with the same goals. And I think that for so many men, I think young men especially, I think they're intimidated.
Yeah. And on sort of the final
Mhm.
thoughts of the podcast, what's one truth that you have either yet to learn or you've already learned in your practice that someone could actually take in and take it as sort of life advice, or they can apply it in a real life
Yeah.
situation?
Yeah. I go back to mindset. Your mindset will determine your happiness. It will determine your health. It will determine your wealth. It'll determine your relationships with people, who you choose to be. And you get to choose this, who you choose to be, and settle for nothing less makes you a powerful person, male or female, doesn't matter. And it's like you get to set the game yourself by the mindset you have. And when you set that mindset in place and it's a positive mindset and you're going forward and you're driven and you're educated and you're looking at opportunities versus looking at what held you back or blaming somebody for why you didn't get so and so, you'll be amazed how your life will just unlock,
Hmm.
and you'll meet some amazing people. You'll find amazing partners. You'll have an amazing life, and all you changed was your mindset.
I love that. I love what you said about unlocking and opportunities, and you said that in the
Yes.
same sentence. But
Yeah.
on that note, Butch, thank you so much
Thank you,
for being on
Sonia.
the podcast. And I hope everyone who's listening has enjoyed this conversation too. Thank you.
I've totally enjoyed it. Thank you for having me, and I'll be happy to come back anytime.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.